Julian was initially skeptical. A backyard, you say? In Sunridge Estates? He said the name of my neighborhood as if it were a foreign country he'd never heard of. Exactly, I replied, my voice brimming with enthusiasm. Think of it as hyper-local luxury, a micro-resort, a backyard paradise. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I held my breath, wondering if I'd gone too far. Then Julian chuckled. Okay, he said. You've piqued my interest. Send me some photos and let's talk. The transformation hadn't been cheap, nor had it been easy. But stepping out onto my newly completed backyard oasis was like stepping into another world. Fine. White sand, imported all the way from the Bahamas, crunched softly under my feet. The crystal-clear pool, a mosaic of turquoise and sapphire tiles, shimmered under the afternoon sun, its cascading waterfalls creating a gentle, soothing murmur. The tiki bar, crafted from reclaimed driftwood and topped with a thatched roof, stood proudly at the edge of the beach, stocked with enough rum and exotic fruit to make even Jimmy Buffett jealous. A hidden sound system, strategically placed among the lush tropical foliage, played the soft, rhythmic sound of ocean waves. Hammocks swayed gently between strategically placed palm trees. Years of dreaming, planning, and sweating over every detail, but finally it was done. My backyard masterpiece. My escape from the beige, cookie-cutter world outside. It was perfect, I thought, sinking into one of the hammocks, a perfectly crafted piña colada in hand. The fire pit, surrounded by glowing LED torches, promised cozy evenings under the stars. This wasn't just a backyard. It was a sanctuary, a personal resort, a testament to the power of hard work and a healthy disregard for budgetary constraints. Of course, I should have known that true perfection is a magnet for Karens. And Karen Perkins was about to prove me right. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime a jarring intrusion into my tropical idyll. I already knew who it was, even before I opened the door. Karen Perkins. The name alone sent shivers down the spines of every homeowner in Sunridge Estates. She was the self-appointed guardian of good taste, the enforcer of community standards, and, in my opinion, the living embodiment of everything wrong with suburbia. She had a face that could sour milk and a voice that could shatter glass. Her blonde bob was perfectly coiffed, her pastel cardigan impeccably buttoned, and her expression permanently set to disapproving. "Mr. Peterson," she began, her voice dripping with a mixture of condescension and barely concealed disgust. "I'm afraid I must register a complaint about your backyard." She said backyard, as if it were a contagious disease. "Oh?" I replied, feigning innocence. "What seems to be the problem, Karen?" "The problem," she said, her eyes sweeping over my meticulously crafted oasis with an expression of utter horror, "is that it's excessive. It's garish. It's simply not in keeping with the character of our neighborhood." She paused, as if searching for the most offensive word she could find. "It's tropical?" I bit back a smile. "It's a beach theme, Karen," I explained patiently. "I like the beach." "Well, it's inappropriate," she declared, her voice rising. It's disrupting the harmony of Sunridge Estates." The harmony, apparently, being rows of identical houses with identical lawns and identically bland landscaping. Karen's initial complaint was just the opening salvo in what quickly became a full-blown war. The following weeks brought a deluge of increasingly absurd complaints, fines, and threats, all delivered with Karen's signature brand of passive-aggressive venom, First, it was the sound of the ocean waves from my hidden speakers. "Excessive noise pollution," she declared, citing an obscure HOA bylaw about unnatural ambient sounds. Then, it was the color of the sand. "Too white," she claimed. "It's reflecting too much sunlight and creating a glare hazard." She even tried to fine me for the excessive relaxation taking place in my hammocks, arguing that it was unseemly and disruptive to the neighborhood's work ethic. Each complaint was accompanied by a formal letter from the HOA, printed on crisp, official-looking stationery and filled with legalese that I barely understood. I'd received threatening notices about fines, liens, and even the potential forced removal of my unauthorized backyard modifications. My internal reaction was a roller coaster of emotions. At first, I was simply annoyed. Then, I was frustrated. But as Karen's attacks became more frequent and more ridiculous, a new feeling began to emerge. A steely determination. This wasn't just about my backyard anymore. This was about fighting back against the tyranny of beige, the oppression of conformity, the sheer unadulterated joylessness of Karen Perkins and everything she represented. I wasn't going to let her win. Not without a fight. And not without turning my backyard into the most spectacular, most excessive, most Karen-infuriating oasis the world had ever seen. The emergency HOA meeting was, predictably, a circus of suburban outrage. The community center room, with its familiar beige walls and uncomfortable folding chairs, felt more like a courtroom than a gathering of neighbors. The air was thick with tension, and the judgmental stares of the assembled homeowners, most of whom seemed to be firmly on Team Karen. Karen herself stood at the front of the room, a PowerPoint presentation titled "The Peterson Problem, a Threat to Our Community," projected behind her. She launched into a shrill, impassioned tirade, denouncing my backyard as a gaudy beach monstrosity, a tropical travesty, and an affront to all that is decent and orderly in Sunridge Estates. She clicked through slides showing photos of my pool, my tiki bar, my hammocks, each image presented as evidence of my egregious crimes against good taste. It wasn't just about the backyard anymore. It was about the principle. It was about the right to enjoy my own property, to create my own little slice of paradise without being harassed by a power-hungry, beige-loving busybody, I thought, my jaw clenched tight. The sheer audacity of her, the smug self-righteousness fueled a fire within me. This beach!" Karen shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at a photo of my pristine white sand, "must be removed immediately. It is a violation of multiple HOA bylaws, a threat to property values, and frankly, an insult to every homeowner who has worked so hard to maintain the aesthetic integrity of our community." The room erupted in a mix of murmurs and applause. I felt a wave of frustration, but also a surge of defiance. This was it, the breaking point. I couldn't fight this with logic, with reason, with appeals to common sense. Karen Perkins didn't operate in the realm of reason. I needed a new strategy, something bold, something unexpected, something that would not only defeat her, but also send a clear message to the entire HOA. Don't mess with my paradise. Karen Perkins, you want a war? You've got one. Prepare to be out-resorted, I vowed internally, a plan, audacious and wonderfully insane, beginning to form in my mind. It came to me in the middle of the night, a flash of inspiration as bright and unexpected as a lightning strike. I'd been tossing and turning, replaying Karen's shrill accusations in my head, feeling the familiar knot of frustration tightening in my chest. How could I fight this? How could I possibly win against the combined forces of Karen and the HOA? And then it hit me. Corporate sponsorship. If Karen hates my backyard because it's too extravagant, then I'll make it even more extravagant. I'll make it so over the top, so ridiculously luxurious that she'll have no choice but to surrender, I thought, a slow grin spreading across my face. It was crazy. It was audacious. It was perfect. I leaped out of bed, grabbed my laptop, and started researching. I wasn't looking for local businesses, for small-time sponsorships. I was aiming for the big leagues. I needed a partner with deep pockets, a brand synonymous with luxury, and a willingness to take a chance on something completely unprecedented. I started compiling a list of high-end resort chains, companies known for their lavish destinations and their deep-pocketed marketing budgets. This wasn't just about defeating Karen. This was about turning my backyard into a statement, a symbol of opulent defiance. It was about creating something so undeniably spectacular that even the most hardened HOA president would be forced to bow down before its sheer, unadulterated fabulousness. The next morning, fueled by caffeine and a burning desire for revenge, I started making phone calls. My first target was Paradise Sands Resorts, a global chain known for its 5-star beachfront properties and its celebrity clientele. Getting past the receptionist was a challenge in itself, but I eventually managed to connect with a marketing executive named Julian, who sounded both bored and slightly amused by my initial inquiry. I felt like I was pitching a reality show, not a backyard. Imagine, I said, a mini resort nestled in the heart of suburbia. A hidden oasis, offering an exclusive escape from the mundane. A unique branding opportunity, a chance to connect with a new demographic. I laid it on thick, emphasizing the viral marketing potential and the unprecedented buzz this partnership would generate. Julian was initially skeptical. A backyard, you say? In Sunridge Estates? He said the name of my neighborhood as if it were a foreign country he'd never heard of. Exactly, I replied, my voice brimming with enthusiasm. Think of it as hyper-local luxury, a micro-resort, a backyard paradise. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I held my breath, wondering if I'd gone too far. Then Julian chuckled. Okay, he said. You've piqued my interest. Send me some photos and let's talk. I sent him the photos, along with a carefully crafted proposal outlining my vision. To my surprise, he called back within an hour. We're intrigued, he said. We'd like to send a team out to take a look. A week later, a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of my house. Out stepped 3 representatives from Paradise Sands Resorts. Julian, the marketing executive, a stern-looking woman named Anya, who I later learned was their head of design, and a surprisingly young guy named Kai, who was apparently their experiential consultant. They looked like they'd just stepped out of a magazine ad, all impeccably dressed and radiating an air of effortless sophistication. They were definitely out of place in Sunridge Estates. I gave them the grand tour of my backyard, trying to act as if hosting a team of luxury resort executives was a perfectly normal occurrence. They walked around, taking notes, their expressions carefully neutral. I could tell they were impressed by the existing setup. The white sand, the pool, the tiki bar, but they also seemed slightly bewildered by the context. So, Julian said, gesturing towards the surrounding houses, this is suburbia? Indeed, I replied, the heart of it. Anya, the designer, was already sketching in a notebook. We could add cabanas here, she said, pointing towards a patch of grass, and maybe a fire dancing performance area over there. Kai, the experiential consultant, was walking around with his eyes closed, taking deep breaths. I'm sensing a strong vibe of escapism, he announced. But we need to amplify it. We need to create a sensory journey. I nodded along, trying to keep up with their jargon. These people were operating on a whole different level, I thought. But if anyone could turn my backyard into a weapon against Karen, it was them. By the end of the visit, they were clearly excited. They saw the potential, the absurdity, the sheer audacity of the project. They were in. The transformation was swift and dramatic. Within weeks, my backyard was transformed from a pretty nice personal oasis into a full-fledged, professionally managed, corporate-sponsored mini-resort. Truckloads of even finer white sand arrived, replacing the already fine sand I'd originally imported. A team of landscapers installed additional palm trees, exotic flowers, and strategically placed boulders, creating a more authentic tropical feel. A crew of workers constructed luxurious private cabanas, complete with plush daybeds, billowing curtains, and personal mini-fridges, now fully stocked with complimentary beverages and snacks, courtesy of Paradise Sands Resorts. Subtle, yet undeniably present, LED lighting was installed throughout the backyard, transforming the space into a glowing, magical wonderland at night. A professional sound system, even more sophisticated than my original setup, was installed, playing a curated playlist of island vibes music, and yes, at Kai's insistence, they even brought in a team of professional fire dancers for special events. The branding was subtle, but effective. The Paradise Sands Resorts logo, a stylized palm tree, was discreetly displayed on the cabanas, the towels, and the drink coasters. A small, elegant sign at the entrance to my backyard proclaimed it, "The Paradise Sands Private Escape Sunridge Estates." An exclusive app was created, allowing guests, mostly my friends and now, surprisingly, many of my neighbors, to book relaxation slots and order complimentary drinks. It was like watching my backyard go from pretty nice to MTV Cribs in a matter of weeks. It was glorious, I thought, surveying the scene with a mixture of awe and disbelief. It was even more over the top than I'd imagined, a monument to luxurious excess, a perfectly crafted weapon of Karen destruction. The unveiling of the Paradise Sands Private Escape sign was the moment I'd been waiting for. I'd strategically positioned it so that Karen would see it the moment she stepped out of her front door. And right on cue, at precisely 8 a.m., the Karen show began. She emerged from her house, dressed in her usual pastel power suit, ready to embark on her daily patrol of the neighborhood. She took one look at the sign, and her face went through a series of transformations that I wish I'd captured on video. First, confusion. Then, disbelief. Then, a slow, creeping horror that spread across her features like a toxic spill. Finally, she exploded. This is unacceptable, she shrieked, her voice reaching a pitch that could shatter glass and probably set off car alarms. She stormed across the street, her perfectly coiffed bob bouncing with each furious step. "You've turned your backyard into a commercial enterprise." I was leaning casually against my tiki bar, sipping a freshly made mango smoothie. Courtesy of Paradise Sands Resorts, of course. "Actually, Karen," I said, with a calm I definitely didn't feel, "it's a private recreational space with an exclusive brand partnership. Care for a complimentary mango smoothie? It's our signature blend." I held out the frosty glass, a picture of serene hospitality. She ignored the smoothie, her eyes bulging with rage. "This is a violation of every HOA rule. You can't just partner with a resort. It's vulgar." "I assure you, Karen, everything is perfectly legal," I said, taking another sip of my smoothie. "I have all the necessary permits. The city has approved it. And, as it turns out, there's nothing in the HOA bylaws that prohibits exclusive brand partnerships with luxury resort chains." "I'll see you in court," she spat, her face now a shade of purple that rivaled the bougainvillea climbing my newly installed pergola. "Looking forward to it," I replied, with genuine enthusiasm. "My resort-appointed lawyer is excellent. He specializes in, well, let's just say he's very familiar with dealing with challenging individuals." The look on Karen's face was priceless. It was the kind of look you see on a cartoon villain just before their evil plan unravels, and I was loving every second of it, I thought, watching her stomp away. Defeated but not yet, I suspected, entirely broken. Karen, true to her word, unleashed a legal firestorm. She filed complaints with the city, the county, and even, I suspect, the state. She tried to get the resort partnership declared a commercial zoning violation. She argued that the increased foot traffic, mostly neighbors enjoying their complimentary spa treatments, was creating a public nuisance. She even tried to claim that the soft imported sand was a biohazard. Each attempt, however, was met with a swift and decisive defeat. The Paradise Sands Resort's legal team, a group of sharp-dressed lawyers who seemed to thrive on crushing petty bureaucrats, was relentless. They had anticipated every possible challenge, and they had the paperwork to prove it. Every permit was in order, every regulation had been meticulously followed, and every I had been dotted and T crossed. The HOA's lawyer, a timid man named Mr. Peabody, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, put up a feeble fight, but he was clearly outmatched. Karen's increasingly desperate and irrational arguments were easily dismantled, her complaints dismissed with prejudice, and her legal maneuvers crushed under the weight of corporate legal power. It was like watching a Chihuahua try to take down a Rottweiler. The HOA meetings became less about community concerns and more about Karen's increasingly wild accusations, which, more often than not, were met with a bored lawyer on speakerphone, informing everyone that, no, actually, imported sand was perfectly legal. The final, ironic blow came from the city council. Karen, in a last-ditch effort to rally support, had demanded a public hearing, hoping to sway the council members to her side. She envisioned a dramatic showdown, a David versus Goliath battle for the soul of suburbia. What she got, instead, was a celebration. The city council, far from condemning my private recreational space, praised it as a unique and innovative attraction that was putting Sunridge Estates on the map. They lauded the partnership with Paradise Sands Resorts as a brilliant example of public-private collaboration and a boost to the local economy. They even presented me with a certificate of commendation, thanking me for my contribution to the community. The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Karen's attempt to destroy my backyard oasis had not only failed, it had backfired spectacularly, turning my gaudy beach monstrosity into a celebrated local landmark. She sat in the audience, her face a mask of silent fury, as the council members gushed about the positive impact my resort was having on the town. The very thing she'd tried to prevent had become a source of civic pride, a testament to the power of innovation, and, of course, a healthy dose of spite. Meanwhile, the residents of Sunridge Estates, initially hesitant and suspicious, were rapidly coming around to the idea of having a five-star resort in their midst. The exclusive invitations, the complimentary cocktails, the free spa treatments, and the sheer novelty of it all were proving irresistible. Even the grumpiest neighbors, the ones who'd initially sided with Karen, were now regular visitors to the Paradise Sands private escape. Mr. Henderson, liberated from his gnome-related anxieties, could often be found lounging by the pool, sipping a margarita. Mrs. Gable, her chihuahua surprisingly quiet for once, was a regular at the weekly fire dancing performances. The contrast between Karen's increasing isolation and the growing popularity of my backyard oasis was stark and humorous. She'd become a pariah, a cautionary tale, while I was, somewhat unexpectedly, a local hero. The HOA meetings, once her domain, were now filled with residents eager to discuss the latest resort-sponsored events and the possibility of expanding the partnership to include other amenities, a community garden perhaps, or maybe even a dog park, all with, of course, appropriate corporate branding. Karen, meanwhile, was left to stew in her own bitterness, a lonely island of discontent in a sea of tropical-themed bliss. Defeated, but not, apparently, broken, Karen launched one final desperate offensive. She announced her candidacy for HOA president, a position she'd held before, but had lost in a previous, unrelated neighborhood scandal involving improperly placed garden flamingos. Her campaign platform was simple and predictably narrow: ban all backyard resorts. Her campaign was a masterclass in negative campaigning, a testament to her unwavering bitterness and her complete disconnect from the prevailing sentiment of the neighborhood. She went door to door, distributing flyers filled with grainy, unflattering photos of my resort and dire warnings about the commercialization of Sunridge Estates. She held town hall meetings, attended mostly by her and her equally disgruntled husband, where she railed against the erosion of community values and the threat to our suburban way of life. She painted me as a greedy, opportunistic villain, a corporate sellout who was single-handedly destroying the fabric of their peaceful community. The problem was, nobody was buying it. Her message of fear and resentment fell on deaf ears, drowned out by the sound of laughter, splashing, and the gentle strumming of ukulele music emanating from my backyard. Her desperate attempts to rally support only served to further alienate her from the very people she was trying to persuade. It was, frankly, painful to watch. I initially had no intention of running for HOA president. I was perfectly content to enjoy my victory from the comfort of my hammock. But watching Karen's pathetic campaign unfold, I realized I couldn't just stand by. I had to finish this. I had to crush her. Not just for myself, but for everyone in Sunridge Estates who had ever suffered under her tyrannical rule. So, I threw my hat in the ring. My campaign, naturally, was the polar opposite of Karen's. It was a celebration of joy, relaxation, and, of course, the glorious absurdity of having a corporate-sponsored resort in my backyard. Paradise Sands Resorts, sensing a golden PR opportunity, went all in. They sponsored a series of lavish campaign events: poolside BBQs with gourmet burgers and unlimited cocktails, sunset cocktail parties with live music, and even complimentary chair massages for all registered voters. My campaign slogan was simple: make Sunridge Estates fun again. It wasn't exactly a fair fight. I had a luxury resort chain backing my campaign. Karen had a clipboard and a burning hatred of happiness, I thought, watching the crowds flock to my events, their faces beaming with delight. I barely had to campaign. The resort and the sheer ridiculousness of the situation did all the work for me. My few public appearances involved me wearing a Hawaiian shirt, delivering a few sentences about community togetherness, and then pointing everyone to the open bar. Election day arrived, and the results were not even close. It was a landslide, a total rout. I won by a margin so overwhelming that it bordered on embarrassing. The residents of Sunridge Estates had spoken, and they had spoken loudly. They preferred piña coladas and poolside relaxation to Karen Perkins and her joyless reign of terror. Karen's reaction was predictable. She stormed out of the community center, her face a mask of utter devastation, refusing to concede defeat. She muttered darkly about voter fraud and corporate influence, but nobody was listening. The celebration was already underway, fueled by complimentary champagne and the collective relief of a neighborhood finally freed from the clutches of its HOA tyrant. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Within a week, a "For Sale" sign appeared in front of Karen's perfectly manicured beige-on-beige house. Within a month, she was gone, vanished from Sunridge Estates, presumably to inflict her brand of suburban tyranny on some other unsuspecting community. And so I returned to my paradise, my fully sponsored, upgraded, and now utterly Karen-proof backyard oasis. The Paradise Sands private escape was more popular than ever, a symbol of victory, a testament to the power of creative defiance. I sat in my hammock, sipping a perfectly crafted Mai Tai, surrounded by happy neighbors, the gentle sound of the waterfalls mingling with the laughter and conversation. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow over my little slice of suburban heaven. Who knew that corporate sponsorship and a burning desire to annoy a Karen could lead to such bliss? I guess sometimes you just gotta turn your backyard into a 5-star resort to find true peace, I thought, raising my glass in a silent toast. To the best and only branded backyard resort in the neighborhood.